August 29th, and Russia almost shot down its own passenger plane.
This is the pilot of the aircraft speaking. I repeat, this is a civilian flight route. Clearance confirmed. We are being targeted by air defense. I repeat, air defense is firing at a civilian aircraft.
Air defense opened fire over the Moscow region. There are explosions in the sky, flames below. What's happening there? It probably overheated. In the sky over Moscow, air defense mistakenly attacked a passenger plane on the Minsk-Moscow flight. Incident, Sheremetyevo. Pantsir S-1 SAM system.
There are people. I repeat, the civilian aircraft was mistaken for a UAV. Record this. Altitude maintained. Route approved. We are under heavy fire.
There's a fire in a residential building in the Moscow region. People are running out into the street in panic. In Belgorod, a Pantsir missile flew straight into a high-rise building. There are wounded. In Dubna, there's a new attack on the Kronstadt drone factory. In Tula, there were strikes on a defense design bureau where air defense systems are being developed. Kursk, Tver, Penza. A series of loud explosions. A 5-story building is on fire in Pushkin. A thermal power plant exploded in Penza, part of the city without power.
The thermal power plant is on fire. So the substation is there.
These are no longer pinpoint strikes. This is chaos inside Russia itself, and it's gaining momentum.
The smoke has gotten thicker.
Across the entire territory of Russia, explosions, fires, and strikes. Moscow is in chaos. Hundreds of flights have been cancelled, airports are paralyzed, thousands of people are sleeping on the floor, crying, fighting for tickets. And this isn't just a glitch, it's a complete aviation collapse costing over $300 million. And all of this is the result of Ukrainian special operations. The Security Service of Ukraine and the main intelligence directorate of the Armed Forces of Ukraine strike accurately, powerfully, and systematically. Just as Israel has been doing for decades. Meanwhile, there are massive attacks on military airfields of strategic and tactical aviation. Sapsan, Ukrainian ballistic missiles, are striking Moscow and St. Petersburg. Drones are in action, strike teams are operating, saboteurs are at work. This isn't defense, it's a hunt. The armed forces of Ukraine are destroying Russia. Web-like operations are becoming a reality on Russian territory. Somewhere a warehouse is burning, somewhere equipment is exploding, somewhere generals are dying. And behind all this is a new military strategy. Right now, we'll discuss this with someone who knows how the Israeli army operates, how Mossad works, how special forces and command centers function under constant threat. On air is Grigory Tamar, a reserve officer of the Israel Defense Forces. This is going to be very powerful.
Hello, I'm very glad to see you.
The feeling is mutual. Grigory, as a former officer of the Israel Defense Forces, please give your assessment of what is happening now in Russia after the special Operation Web. Do you think this marks a new stage in drone warfare and accordingly in the war of intelligence agencies?
When Operation Web was announced, I said at the time, friends, the operation is not over. This is only the beginning, and it will continue to develop. We will witness many more, so to speak, glorious pages in the military history of the Ukrainian armed forces and the various special services that exist in your country. And what you have just described is simply the next stage of Operation Web. It is a part of it. Operation Web is not over. It has only just begun. It had a beginning. At the very least, the beginning is obvious to the general public. When it actually started, we don't know either, and it's unlikely we ever will. Maybe if in 20 years one of your distinguished officers writes a memoir, perhaps then we'll find out. In any case, as you quite rightly pointed out, Ukraine is demonstrating essentially the same thing that Israel demonstrated, that we are living in an era of different kinds of wars. Wars now unfold differently. They happen in a different way. But this era of brute force, which Russia relied on so heavily when it launched its large-scale aggression against your country, is becoming a thing of the past. No one fights the way they did during World War II anymore. Now we are witnessing a different methodology where essentially intelligence is valued above brute force, and this leads to results. Sometimes the reason for this is limited resources, as is the case with you. Sometimes the reason is certain political constraints, as we have here in Israel, but that's not what's truly important. The truly important thing is the ultimate result, that with these kinds of highly asymmetric responses, When a truly creative approach is effectively combined with very systematic and thorough planning, when significant intellectual and material resources are carefully invested in advance in meticulously planning the entire operation, in its comprehensive development, and in skillfully managing the ongoing operation, we can clearly see what this remarkable approach can ultimately lead to. And I want to point out that we still don't know what real damage this has caused on Russian territory. We don't know how many drones hit their targets, what they blew up, or what they didn't blow up. But even if not a single Ukrainian drone, I want to emphasize this, even if not a single Ukrainian drone reached any target, already now we can say that the Russian Federation is suffering enormous material losses. This is a very powerful blow to the prestige of the authorities. There are propagandistic and political consequences, and this is actually pushing the Russian economy to the brink of collapse. And that's even before we've counted the hits. I want to emphasize this point.
Dear audience, please like this video. Write in the comments what you think about this chaos, about the military strikes on Russian territory. Subscribe to Grigory Tamara's YouTube channel and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Dasha Shaslivaya. There are 700,000 of us. I thank you for this number. We reach this together. And in the comments, write where you're watching us from, your location. Grigory, when they say 20 billion in losses, more than $250 million just from the consequences of the aviation collapse from the aviation industry, there's panic. From a military political perspective, how much of a blow is this to the regime? Because after that, the Minister of Transport suddenly and unexpectedly resigned.
Well, without a doubt, this is a massive blow to the prestige of the authorities. It would honestly be strange to deny this or to somehow try to cover it up, to put a fig leaf over it and shamefully try to hide it. I want to point out that all these figures that economists are now citing as economic and financial losses are completely arbitrary. But there are a lot of consequences that simply cannot be calculated going forward. Just imagine, for example, Russian citizens planning their lives in the future, and a person will have to ask themselves, should I fly or not fly on an airplane? He might think, well, Ukraine could strike with drones again, so I won't take the risk, I'll stay home. Now imagine, on the scale of a huge country, how many people will make that choice and how much this will reduce. I'm just giving this as an example, so it's clear that the impact of such actions is unpredictable. And sometimes it's like a domino effect, it starts to collapse. And this could be one of those triggers. I don't know what this will ultimately lead to. I'm not a prophet, but the fact that this is a very powerful blow to the very pillars of Russian statehood in the broadest sense of the word, that's obvious. We're witnessing this firsthand right now. And by the way, the suicide or murder, we don't know what really happened there, of the Minister of Transport is a vivid illustration of this. And by the way, I want to tell you, every intelligence agency has its own professional style, its own traditions, its own professional characteristics, right? Take Israel, for example. They operate in certain ways, right? But I don't know why this person died, what the cause of his death was. I don't know. We, after all, don't have any information. The official version is suicide, but maybe he was eliminated. And who eliminated him? Was it his own people? Or maybe it was your people who did it. Yes, well, you can ask these kinds of questions, can't you? To create the fog of war, why not? The transport minister of a warring state is a legitimate target. Why not? See, I don't know. We don't know the answer to the question of under what circumstances his life ended, right? So we can only ask these questions rhetorically, and we won't know the answer for now. And of course, we are not going to take the official version from the Russian Federation as the ultimate truth in response. I think that's clear to anyone.
Yes, Grigory, there's already information circulating that this was a struggle between the Kovalchuks and the Rotenbergs, and one side won while the other lost. And as a result, the minister was eliminated. This version is now spreading widely in Telegram channels and opposition Russian media.
Well, again, for now, I would treat all these versions as nothing more than just versions, because the very same people spreading them, believe me, don't have any more sources of information than we do. I say this with full responsibility. That's it. As for, I would also like to point out another significant thing here. When the devastating war initially started, well, everyone abroad, absolutely everyone, was in complete and utter shock. No one expected it, no one believed it, and so on. And I remember very well, at noon on February 24th, I wrote an open letter to Russian officers, which was circulated on social media, calling for an immediate end to the criminal war, to stop the aggression. I appealed to their professional duty, to their professional conscience, to universal human values, and so on. In response, so to speak, I received a huge wave of mockery and ridicule, and they said, in 3 days we'll be in Kiev, so come visit us in Kiev then, we'll have a drink, and then we'll discuss everything. And I told them, listen, we had a great Israeli military leader, General Ariel Sharon, who later became prime minister. He had many sayings, he fought all his life, and he had this proverb: you always know how you start a war, you never know how you finish it. And I told them, listen, if you think this is a one-sided game, you are very much mistaken. You don't understand who you've started a war with. There are very few nations, peoples who have entered the international, language. Any cultured person in any country in the world knows what a Kazakh is, right? If you say Kazakh to an American, if he's well read and educated, he'll understand, even though it's not an English word. So there are very few like that. Well, for example, with the Japanese, there's samurai, right? Let's say, but there aren't many such examples. And I tell them, you're starting a war with Kazakhs. Do you even realize what you're doing? Don't you understand? After all, the war will come to your own home. It's only a matter of time before you get a response. And so when at some point, I don't even remember exactly when, maybe a year or a year and a half ago, Ukrainian drones started flying into Russian territory, they were like, but why us? What do we have to do with it? Meanwhile, we've been bombing Ukrainian territory for 30 years, wiping settlements off the face of the earth. But what? It's allowed to hit us too. We can get hit as well? That wasn't part of the deal. You see what I mean, right? They didn't make that kind of deal with Putin because Putin promised them something completely different. Putin promised them Kiev in 3 days. That's it. And of course, I want to tell you, all your successes in this war are the result of a competitive advantage, namely the quality of your soldiers, your people, compared to the Russians. Just recently, I had a recording on my channel. It hasn't been published yet, but this material will be released in the next few days. A Ukrainian officer spoke, and he described this evolution, how, from the ground up, they learned to defeat the Russian army not by numbers, but by skill, because it was impossible to outnumber them. And all your achievements look, for example, at the Black Sea Fleet. Your country, which doesn't have a combat fleet, has neutralized the Russian Black Sea Fleet as a fighting force, driven it into harbor, and now it has no decisive significance. By using completely new tactical methods in ways that no one has ever fought at sea before. Basically, Ukraine is a landlocked country. It has no history of a naval fleet. That only emerged during this war. As for intelligence services, you are now demonstrating a level that matches the Israeli intelligence agencies, which are considered the best in the world. You are doing this just as well as we do. The results are impressive. And this is not the end yet. So, when people were making predictions, counting the number of divisions, the number of tanks, it's all a bit like how the Israelis defeated the coalition of Arab countries and the Soviet Union in the Six-Day War, even though those forces outnumbered Israel by 7, 8, sometimes even 12 times, depending on the metric. So, as they say, you have to fight not with numbers, but with skill. By the way, this was said by a Russian commander at the UN. It was his opponent.
Grigory, a new negative record. In the past 24 hours, Russia has launched more than 740 drones and missiles at Ukraine. This is the official statistic from the General Staff. And in general, when you talk to military analysts, everyone says that Russia has greatly increased its production capacity and that it will attack 2 or 3 times a week with more than 500 drones on a regular basis. And Magyar has officially stated that we must be prepared for 1,000 drones per day launched from the territory of the Russian Federation. In other words, missile and drone terror. I'd like to ask you, how can this be countered? Does this mean we need to increase the number of mobile groups, use interceptor drones to take down Russian drones, or should we carry out systematic, ongoing ballistic and drone attacks on Russian territory to turn their lives into a nightmare? What do you think?
As a military historian, I'd like to give you a few compelling historical examples. Back in those days, when Hitler tried to relentlessly crush the British Empire, he subjected many English cities, and London especially above all, to a brutal aerial terror campaign, and he truly tried to break the very spirit of the British people. Churchill then addressed the entire nation with a rather interesting and significant message. Well, it's a democratic country after all, so constructive feedback is certainly expected and indeed welcomed. The thing is, when Britain's air defense and British fighter pilots fought the Germans in the air and shot down German planes, there were cases when the wreckage fell and people were killed, even though these were already downed German planes. And there were quite a few such incidents. And Churchill addressed the people with a request. Please write to the editorial office of the Times newspaper, if I'm not mistaken, and say whether you want us to continue shooting down German planes, or perhaps on the contrary, maybe we shouldn't. Let the air raid siren sound, let people hide in bomb shelters. Maybe in the end there will be fewer casualties that way. No one knew. There had never been such an example in history before. And London has sent so much mail that the system collapsed. The British Postal Service was in chaos, demanding that enemy planes be shot down regardless of the possible casualties. It didn't matter. The main thing was to shoot them down. When we recently had the war with Iran, we struck exclusively at Iran's military targets, nuclear infrastructure sites, and symbols of authority. The Iranians, on the other hand, deliberately targeted major metropolitan areas. I didn't see a single Israeli citizen who said, "Oh, please stop this already. We're tired of running to bomb shelters. We're scared there." Everyone was saying, "Look, let the army finish its job. Let them see this through to the end." I am certain that the citizens of Ukraine are in no way, in this regard, any less persistent in their determination, their will to win, and their desire for independence than the examples I mentioned earlier. As for the effective means of resistance, you are absolutely and entirely right. What's truly needed here is a comprehensive and systematic approach to meticulously build a completely new and robust form of air defense. Let me tell you, when the war began for us on October 7, 2023, and then on October 8, the very next day, Hezbollah attacked us from Lebanese territory. They started actively using drones. We had never seen such large-scale use of drones against our territory before that moment, and to some extent, this caught us off guard. And there were significant casualties. The house of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was attacked by a drone. Fortunately, no one was hurt. He wasn't there at the time. A barracks was attacked, as well as a mess hall where new recruits were having dinner, and 7 young men were killed by a drone. These are just a few of the most striking examples. And Israel approached solving this complex and multifaceted problem comprehensively, completely changing its technological and systemic response to this significant and evolving threat. So when the Iranians recently tried to attack us with drones, they launched 100, but only 1 drone reached Israeli territory and hit a single civilian building. This means it's necessary to restructure and optimize the air defense system, even though you have specific resource limitations. This is a major problem. You need to sound the alarm and reach out to all your Western friends. And it's not just the Americans. Europeans can do much more than they are currently doing, much more. First and foremost, this is a European problem. It's Europe whose house is on fire, not Trump's house burning on his lawn. That's why the Germans, the British, the French, the Italians, and the Swedes, they all can do more. I'm not mentioning the Czechs because the Czechs are already doing more than anyone could expect from any country. That's it. Although, why didn't I mention them? Because the Czechs have an excellent military industry. So all these countries can do much more for you, and they are obliged to because you are the ones protecting them. Now, regarding your remark about striking Russian cities, I've been saying for a long time, listen, all of this will start to end when you blow the Ministry of Defense in Moscow, the General Staff, and Lubyanka to hell. Just level them to the ground. And believe me, that will have a very sobering effect. And you can already do this today. You possess the formidable means of firepower that unequivocally allow you to accomplish this. In a very real sense, you should perhaps pay considerably less attention to your Western allies and instead diligently do precisely what truly needs to be done, what you profoundly believe is inherently right, not what someone in the White House or indeed any other governmental or influential house thinks is either good or bad for your nation.
Grigory, you've raised a very important issue, both as a military historian and as a reserve officer of the Israel Defense Forces. This is the position of NATO, this is the position of America. So Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, comes out and says, we produce in a year as many munitions as Russia does in 3 months. And we simply don't have enough capacity. And now Trump has turned the whole process of transferring Patriot missiles to Ukraine into, I don't know, a whole series. It's just unbelievable. First, Hexo blocked it, then they blamed the Pentagon, then Trump came out and said, no, we will provide them. Before that, he spoke with a journalist whose husband is fighting. It's all taking a very long time. And so we watch all of this, how Trump's opinion shifts dramatically from Putin is a great guy to Putin has made me angry. And we don't even understand what he's going to do.
Yes. Zelensky wore the wrong suit, and a week later he's a good guy again. And well, yes, the person, yes. Listen, well, yes. Listen, but if you think Trump is only mocking you, you're mistaken. Let me give you an example. So we're at war with Iran. A ceasefire is announced. After that, Iran launches a missile strike on the peaceful city of Beersheba. 4 Israelis are killed. 4 Israelis. They were sitting in a protected room. But protected rooms aren't designed to withstand a direct hit from a ballistic missile with a 650-kilogram warhead. 4 people die. Our government scrambles an air group, 50 fighter jets. They're flying to strike Tehran. Halfway there, the planes turn back because Trump called our Minister of Defense. Well, you understand the level of national humiliation and so on, right? I mean, Trump, as they say, is a problematic person. Yes, controversial, but listen, we didn't choose him, and that's just how it is. That's the case for both you and us. Unfortunately, we don't have any other partner in the White House. This is what we have, and for another 3.5 years, whether we like it or not, we have to work with him. He has negative qualities, he has positive qualities like any person. We need to try to make the most of his positive qualities and somehow smooth out the negative ones. But I want to emphasize this once again. This statement by the Europeans about how they supposedly can't keep up with the Russian Federation in terms of capabilities, it's a disgrace, a shame, it's shameless cynicism, I just don't want to lower the level of my speech. Out of respect for your channel, I'm not resorting to foul language, although it would be very fitting here.
Yes.
The thing is, I'll just give you an example. First, there are more Europeans than Americans. Well, numerically, their population in the European Union is larger than in the United States. They have greater production capacity than the US. These are absolute industrial giants such as Germany, Great Britain, Sweden, France, Italy. It is a highly developed industrial country. I'm not even counting such, well, in quotes, small countries as Austria, the Netherlands, and so on. Yes, Norway. That's it. And, I want to give you a compelling example. Since the very beginning of the recent war, our significant war has been actively going on for a substantial 20 months now. The robust Israeli defense industry has impressively increased its overall output by more than 100%, effectively more than doubling its previous production. Since the large-scale conflict began, that is, Israel has more than completely doubled its production capabilities, and we are, after all, a relatively small country in terms of geographical size and population. And Europe has increased its arms production capacity since the large-scale aggression against Ukraine by the Russian Federation by only 30%. How is it that great, powerful Europe couldn't find the resources to at least double its production? Of course, they won't have enough. Of course, they will lag behind Russia. Not only are they lagging behind Russia, but they also allow Russia to trade in hydrocarbons. And meanwhile, Ukraine is bleeding, shielding European capitals from these hordes that are marching west, openly declaring that this is their goal today. They don't even try to hide it. I also want to say that we can actually view some of the positive changes that have taken place in Berlin under the new government in a favorable light. But overall, of course, Europe, and here, by the way, I agree with Trump, on what? That this is first and foremost a European problem. And the Europeans are behaving unacceptably in this situation. They could give you everything you need to win, except for some very specific niche products. And for example, things like communications equipment, intelligence data, those kinds of things that at the moment only the Americans can provide since there are no alternatives yet. But overall, everything else, aviation, air defense systems, maybe not the entire range, but the vast majority, as well as the necessary armored forces, artillery, and various other systems. So in other words, if the goal had been set, well, again, you have to understand they have other problems in Europe. Europe is gradually turning into an Arab caliphate. Well, I understand, who created this problem for them? They created it themselves.
Right now, there are two strategies. Trump's strategy is to first sit down at the negotiating table and make a deal with Putin. But what can you even negotiate about with terrorist number one? And strategy two is to fight, win, and essentially push out to the borders of 1991. And now former Defense Minister Reznikov has said that Ukrainian society is ready for a long and exhausting war until victory. This is very important. Grigory, considering Israel's experience, how do you think Ukraine can achieve victory today? In other words, we fought, but ultimately we won, and our goal was to destroy Putin and his army.
You see, the thing is, when citizens in Israel or Ukraine look at their wars, it seems to them, as the saying goes, that the world revolves around them. But that's not entirely true. Just look at what Trump is trying to do now in the Middle East. And I ask you to pay close attention now, because this is directly related to the Ukrainian issue. Right now, he is building a certain structure in which, for the first time in a long while, Israel is not the main pillar for the Americans. It's important, but not the main one. The main pillar is Saudi Arabia. And so, onto this core of Saudi Arabia, he is stringing together all the other elements of this structure. He's trying to write. This includes Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Bahrain, and Qatar. That's what he'd like, right? And Morocco, and eventually in the future, Azerbaijan, and so on. He wants to bring all these countries into the so-called Abraham Accords. As of today, at this very moment, the countries included in these accords are Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco. He wants to expand this and give Saudi Arabia a leading role. Now, who is Israel's main partner in the world after the United States? After the United States, Israel's main partner is India, our most important geopolitical partner. And so I look at this and ask myself, this whole structure that he then wants to unite with India, what is he building it for? Is it because he just wants to play with building blocks? He is building this with one single goal and purpose, to direct it against China. And when I say directed against China, I don't mean like Putin to send tanks forward. I mean a completely different formula, economic, geopolitical pressure, and so on. So for him, the overarching goal is the struggle against China. I want to emphasize not war, but struggle. Within this paradigm, Russia is only important to him in the sense that it is an ally of China, and it is crucial for him to pull Russia away from China. He is now, in this current geopolitical climate, trying to feed Ukraine to Russia, and thus, well, to pull Russia out of China's significant and growing orbit. But he doesn't understand, because Americans generally have limited imagination and are rather narrow-minded. He doesn't understand the peculiarities of Putin's mentality. He thinks that if he offers Putin a very generous, indeed a truly substantial and significant gift, something of immense value and considerable benefit, and then subsequently demands some relatively minor and easily agreeable concessions from Putin in return, then Putin, well, logically and quite reasonably, since he is being offered so much and stands to gain a great deal, will undoubtedly agree to the terms. But Putin is a person of a different mentality. He can't agree even to these minor concessions. That's why the idea that you can make a deal with Putin on terms convenient for him is a bluff. It's impossible. Putin is incapable of making these compromises, just as Hamas is incapable of making compromises. This is the very nature of terrorist organizations. That is precisely why I firmly believe that, in the ultimate conclusion, all these extensive negotiation processes and their associated attempts will inevitably burst and dissipate just like a fragile soap bubble. It's only a matter of time, and I believe it won't take much time because Trump doesn't have much patience. And at the very moment when it all truly bursts, then Trump will really undoubtedly fly into a rage and, yes, decisively give Ukraine what it currently lacks to win in terms of essential weapons. But that's simply not enough to truly win. It's not nearly enough for you to just acquire a substantial amount of weapons right now. You currently have one significant problem that neither Donald Trump nor the entirety of Europe can effectively solve for you. This is your internal problem, and you will have to solve it yourself. The primary reason why the Russian forces are still not in the capital city of Kyiv is that when your nation was brutally attacked, your courageous people bravely stood up to the death for their cherished freedom and valiantly fought in a truly remarkable and unexpected way that no one in the entire world ever expected could even possibly happen. 3.5 years have passed. To a large extent, the population, the people, have lost trust in the authorities and lost their motivation to resist. Right now, your government needs to come out to the people and completely reconsider this form of relationship so that people once again feel that they need to join the army, that they need to continue defending their country. If this doesn't happen, no matter how much weaponry you are given, it won't help because it is the people who win, not the weapons.
So we need new processes in mobilization or a contract-based army. What do you think about this?
No, a contract army will not solve your problem. It has never solved it. That's a separate discussion. By the way, I conducted research on this topic, and I am a strong opponent of having a contract army in Israel. And those who talk about a contract army have no idea what they're talking about. A contract army is suitable for those states that are not engaged in large-scale wars. I'm not just talking about mobilization right now. Mobilization is just a part, merely a fragment of the problem I'm trying to highlight for you now. I'm talking about a broader perspective on this process. There was a war in Israel just recently. People were eager to get to Israel. There was a rescue operation to bring back those 150,000 Israelis who were abroad. No one was trying to leave Israel. Do you understand? I'm not saying this to imply, oh, how wonderful the Israelis are. Let's all give them a round of applause. I'm simply describing this as an example. And I know personally what was happening in Ukrainian society when the war began. Those lines at the military enlistment offices, which everyone saw all over the world, those people who were eager to get to the front and were ready to tear the occupier apart with their bare teeth. So, in a sense, when the authorities demonstrated disregard for their own people, a lack of respect for them, this is something that needs to change now. The authorities need to find the inner strength to address the people in a humane way and convey the necessity of continuing to resist. You have the government that you have. You chose it yourselves. No one appointed it to you from the outside. This is the government you have, and for now you won't have another one. So with this government, something needs to happen for change to occur.
Grigory, do you see that Russia still has the capacity for offensive operations? Because we can see that the summer offensive campaign is in full swing. When talking to Ukrainian military analysts, they say that there will also be a serious new phase of strikes in the fall. And in general, how long do you think the Russian war machine is prepared to keep fighting today? So are we facing a very long, exhausting war that could last several more years, or maybe even up to a decade?
As the historical experience of the numerous wars teaches us, all the significant wars that Russia as a distinct civilization has unfortunately lost were lost primarily for specific reasons when its logistics and economic system simply could not adequately cope with the immense military historical challenge that history itself posed to Russia at that particular time. Both the Crimean campaign of the 19th century, when they were unable to supply the troops sufficiently due to severe backwardness in terms of railroads, and the Russo-Japanese War, when there was essentially a collapse of logistics, and World War I, when industry could not cope with the task of supplying the army with what it needed. All these historical cases are not merely examples of some kind of direct military defeat, but rather they are profound instances where logistical capabilities and the broader economic infrastructure fundamentally failed to adequately meet what the relentless march of history truly demanded. As of today, as long as Putin can keep printing his petrodollars, so to speak, he will keep throwing them into the furnace of war, and he will keep sacrificing the paid-for lives of his citizens, whom he sees as mere cogs in the machine. He doesn't consider them human because that's not how you treat people. And he will keep throwing them into the furnace of war. And here, so to speak, everything is in the hands of your Western friends. If they wanted to bring down the Russian economy, they could have done it long ago. It's actually quite simple to do. The problem is that everyone is making money off of this, and your Western friends are the first among them. Putin has managed to build a mirror economy that has integrated very well into the global economic system. Here, the truly good news for you might be that if my particular version is indeed correct, and the absolutely main thing for the Americans is the ongoing fight against China, and they perceive Putin only as a mere element in this significant struggle, then when he ultimately fails to adequately meet their specific expectations, that's precisely when perhaps some truly powerful economic tools will be brought into play to, so to speak, fundamentally change the entire situation. As for the possibility of Russia launching an offensive, for as long as I can remember, this war has been going on, and it's been going on for so long now that, honestly, it's almost impossible to believe anymore. I remember, for example, you defeated the Russians near Kiev in the spring, they fled, then they regrouped, and the summer offensive began. And that's it. They said, that's it. This summer we'll put an end to the Kiev regime. That's it. We'll crush them there. We'll break through the front. We'll break out into the operational space. Okay, that was 3 years ago. There you go. And every time, every 6 months, we hear about some terrifying Russian offensive that's supposed to wipe you out, and then another round of brutal fighting begins. Both sides take losses, and in the end, we end up, well, the story of Bakhmut repeats itself, you see? When for a small town that had no significance at all, and back then, people explained to me, no, you don't understand. Once Bakhmut falls, everything will collapse for them. Their front will crumble, will break through, come in from the flank, from the rear, from above, from below. That's it, basically. But we didn't. I said, listen, are you idiots? What are you doing? What are you doing? People don't fight wars like this. I mean, what is this supposed to be? And, you know, I want to tell you as a military historian, I devoted a lot of effort at one time to trying to understand what happened on June 22nd, 1941. How did Stalin build such a massive machine, so many tanks, planes, artillery, personnel, and yet it all collapsed like a house of cards? That's it. And, you know, I read one expert, then another, this theory, that theory. But I understood everything on February 24th. Everything can be explained in one sentence, because they are idiots. You see? Idiots, that's what they are. That's how they fought throughout their entire history. And they fought without any regard for human life, throwing people into the furnace of war, not sparing resources. Resources, as they say, God didn't deprive them of. That's it. That's all there is to it. That's the whole, entire, and complete secret. And the only effective and viable way to truly counter this overwhelming and brutal force is with superior qualitative attributes. Intellectual, strong motivational drive, extensive and rigorous training, exceptional qualifications, and advanced technical means. If, so to speak, your esteemed Western partners' generous assistance and support truly allows for it.
Grigory Tamara, Reserve Officer of the Israel Defense Forces. That was very powerful. Grigory, thank you, and I hope to see you again soon on my YouTube channel. Friends, please like this video, subscribe to Grigory Tamara's YouTube channel, and to my YouTube channel, Dasha Shaslivaya. Grigory, thank you very much.
All the best. I wish you victories.